Good evening, ma'am.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening. I was nervous.
The same thing with me too, ma'am, because I am at home.
Okay,
and,
yeah.
and the support from university is strong, but
Yes.
at home it won't be
True.
so.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
everybody is like that. Everybody has gone home, isn't it? This is what
Yeah. Most of the persons are at home only.
Mm.
And there are many to join. I think we can wait for 3 to 4 minutes,
Oh,
ma'am.
yes. Oh, yes. I just wanted to make sure that I'm not missing. 22 people have joined.
Yeah. And this time too, again, it's in the evening.
Yes.
Many ladies won't be able to attend because of their
Home activities.
Yeah.
But only ladies have joined, apart from Dr. Shaji.
No, there are.
Hello, Dr.
Hello,
Shaji.
sir. Hello, madam.
I hope this time there will be no calamity.
No,
I don't know.
no,
Were
no.
you there last time when it?
Yes.
You were there.
Yeah. There are too many meetings this day.
Oh.
7 o'clock, we have a national meeting. We have a local meeting.
Oh dear.
So I think this
is one of the side effects of COVID.
Yeah.
Is to have all these meetings. Wow.
That Kichu sir won't be able to come because it is 12:30 at Australia.
Oh, Dr. Nair.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yes.
He said it is a busy day for him tomorrow, so he won't be able to attend.
Okay.
Today, ma'am, you had something else like backup?
No. The same. Last time it was a one-off. I mean, I don't know. It never happens. It just happened. But one thing I realize is that, see, if electricity goes, briefly, sometimes it can go.
Yeah.
Yes, I will. Do you have the my PowerPoint?
No, ma'am.
Oh, I should have
I
sent
didn't
it to you.
check.
But one thing,
Yeah.
you do have the recorded one.
I
Just
didn't know. Okay. I didn't download in this system. That is in the university system I had downloaded it.
oh, so what shall I do now? Shall I quickly send it to you by email?
Okay. Why you feel nervous about that?
No, I'm not. But you know, it would be terrible if it happens the second time. That's the only thing.
No, ma'am. Just talk.
Okay.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Doesn't matter.
No, just a disappointment for the people who took all the trouble to come.
Yeah, it's that. Even then, it's okay.
I think it's very clear at the moment, so it should be all right.
Yeah.
Can you give us your slides, Alka?
That is Krishnan, sir.
Yes, yes.
Shall I send it by email now? I hope I won't.
To whom, ma'am?
To you.
So that you can share it with everybody. Or can't you do that? Subhadra, send it to
Yeah.
But now that means I have to come out of this and.
No. Then
Now already I came out of it. Oh dear.
No need. No need, ma'am.
No, I have come out of the Zoom. What to do now?
You are in the Zoom
you are
only,
very much in
ma'am.
Zoom. We can.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Because sometimes you click something.
No need, ma'am. Don't worry. It's all. Leave everything.
Okay.
You can just speak if it is not working. But it will work today, ma'am. It's not a problem.
She's the ever optimist.
I know, yeah.
Dealing with people like you, Alka, she needs to be an optimist.
I know. I have asked my students to join. I don't know whether they came.
It would have been wonderful if they are there.
Yeah, my PG student. No, they are very obedient. So I'm just looking to see whether but they also have got work to do. Some may be in COVID duty.
Yeah.
Nandini
madam is there.
Ah, yes. No, my students haven't joined.
Haven't joined? They will come.
No, they don't.
Subhadra, I will around 7:30 or so. I'll have to leave for another meeting.
Yeah. Okay, sir. No issue.
I've heard part of it last time.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It will be in the YouTube too, sir.
Yeah. I'll see
The
that.
recording will be. Yeah. Okay. Feel free.
There's only one issue when you upload these things. If you've got a little time on the YouTube, then your presentation should not include any slides which you have taken from other sources.
Oh yes.
So that I didn't realize it, and she put it on the YouTube. There are some which I have taken. If you give the reference, it's all right.
Yeah.
But there are one or two which I have just taken and not given the references.
You can say that now. You can acknowledge it.
Yeah.
That's good enough. Short of it.
Okay, ma'am. Can we start?
Yes.
7:05.
Yes, please do start.
Yeah. Okay. Good evening, all. Respected Honorable VC, Dr. Mohan Kundumal sir, Honorable PVC, Professor Dr. Vijayan sir, Speaker of the Day, Dr. Alka Ganesh, and other dignitaries. Greetings from the Center for Gerontological Studies. Today, we are here to have a short discourse on dietary needs of the elderly people. This topic is a very important one, as we all know that the food choices make a huge impact on how you feel today, tomorrow, and what the future holds in terms of promoting and maintaining good health. This is particularly true for older persons who are vulnerable to malnutrition. Moreover, attempts to provide them with adequate nutrition encounters many practical problems. In this session, we will be able to bring a clarity to these questions from our renowned speaker, Dr. Alka Ganesh. She was with us on 1/10/2020, which was the International Day for Older Persons. Though she started with the session, she could not continue due to network issues, and she had kindly consented to deliver the session again. My duty is to welcome you all. First of all, I cordially welcome Honorable VC Dr. Mohan Kundumal sir, who had been the constant support for the conduct of these webinars. I also welcome Honorable VC Dr. Vijayan sir, Registrar Manoj sir, Dean Academic Unnikrishna sir, Dean Students Affairs Dr. Iqbal sir, and also the Speaker of the Day, Dr. Alka Ganesh. And also I welcome all the experts and other dignitaries, and also there are many veterans in this group who have come to be with us. Now a few words about Alka ma'am. She had done her MBBS and MD in General Medicine, and she was the faculty of CMC Vellore, and she retired as HOD and professor from the Department of Medicine in 2008. After that, she is HOD in Medicine and consultant geriatrician in GKNMH Coimbatore. She has a training fellowship in geriatric medicine at Newcastle upon Tyne, 1996. Training fellowship in geriatric medicine, visiting professor at University of Malaysia, 1999 to 2001. And she was the president of Indian Academy of Geriatrics, 2012 to 2014. And also she had received the Distinguished Teacher Award, National Board, 2014. And she has many publications to her credit in national and international journals. So she is the apt person for us to be with us today. I welcome you, ma'am, for the wonderful session. Ma'am, please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Subhadra. And now I will start the talk. So my talk today is about the nutritional needs of the elderly. And I would like to discuss this in 3 sessions. Before we start, we do ask these questions. Can the lifespan be increased? In fact, one of the blessings that Indians give to younger people is, may you live 100 years. But paradoxically, nobody says, I hope you will grow old. Though they are both this two sides of the same coin, we do not say that. Because old age is associated with a lot of misery and ill health, and nobody likes to be really old. So the question that we ask is, can the lifespan be increased? Or now we ask, can the health span be increased? And if it can be increased, what should we do? Is it our genes, the nature, or is it nurture? Is it the environment that we live in? If it is the environment, then it is something that we can manipulate. And let us see whether we can do that in terms of the diet. And if we can't increase the lifespan, can old age at least be made pleasant, so that people have coined a word, compression of misery, so that the illnesses of old age come right at the end. So I'm going to talk today in 3 sessions. The first one, we will talk about the scientific rationale for special nutrition requirements of the elderly. We'll have a brief time to talk and discuss. And after that, I would like to apply the science of nutrition to the diet that we actually prescribe for health promotion and disease management in the elderly. And finally, I would like to focus on the nutritional adaptations in the Indian context for the elderly and suggestions for future research. So coming to session 1, our aim in looking at nutritional requirement is to decrease the biological aging process, change the pace of aging, prevent the diseases of old age, and delay ill health right till the end. And how can we do that? It's mainly to avoid toxins, adequate exercise, and the good nutrition, which is the talk for today. This is explained a bit more in this slide, where you can see on the x-axis, I have plotted the chronological age, and on the y-axis is the biological age. And this narrow window between these 2 red lines is the normal aging process. The point we're trying to make is, can the normal aging process slope be decreased so that we age slowly? So that if you have a chronological age of 80 and you plot it against the biological age, maybe you're only 50 or 60, so your organs are aged only 60 when your actual age is 80. But what are the factors that can be used to manipulate this? So scientists say that the genetic...
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yes.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yes.
Slideshow has not started.
Oh, but I'm showing it. Maybe I didn't show the screen.
Share. It has not been shared. That's fine.
Oh, I'm so sorry. How did that happen? So what should I do now? I've not got that shared screen thing.
Adlan sir,
Oh, I'm
any
so
idea?
sorry. Oh, I didn't do that. It's my fault.
Yeah, okay.
Now?
Okay.
Okay.
It started.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
So I just quickly do these. Oh, that's really, I'm so sorry to everybody. Okay. So I already talked about the 3 questions, and really I'm on this slide. So I'm glad everybody can see it now. So this is the focus I was saying of chronological age with biological aging. And scientists say that the genetic predisposition, the genes that we're born with, only contribute to about 30% of the aging process, whereas the rest 65% depends upon the nurture or the environment. So if the diet is unhealthy, you have comorbid diseases, there's substance abuse and toxins, and epigenetic reprogramming is disfavorable, then the normal aging process can be, the pace can be increased and you have premature aging. Whereas the converse, if you have a healthy diet and good lifestyle, then the favorable epigenetic reprogramming would decrease the slope. And this is what we are going to talk about today. We are going to talk about how a healthy diet may help in the process of decreasing the aging process, so that the chronological age, though it goes on inexorably, the biological age can be depressed. So in 2002, WHO brought out a paper where they said nutrition for older persons, keep fit for life. And one of the things they said is that the nutritional requirement in the elderly is undefined. And I would like to say that 18 years later, it is still undefined. Why are these special nutrition needed in the elderly? For one thing, as we age, the requirement for nutrients change because 2 points only I'll mention here, but there are many others. One is the lean body mass, the composition of the body changes. So the lean body mass decreases and the fat compartment increases. The basal metabolic rate also decreases in the elderly. So you can see how this would have a profound effect on whatever nutrients that one takes. The other thing is that many of the chronic non-communicable diseases of old age, like diabetes and hypertension, they are related to diet. And so is there something that we can do to nutrition, not only in old age, even earlier, so that we can reverse or slow down the pace of aging? Coming to details, we know that many cancers, prostate, colon, breast, are definitely related to diet, the degenerative diseases, osteoporosis. And one thing is well known is that micronutrient deficiency is very common in the elderly. And these micronutrients, as we will see, have a profound effect on the aging process by scavenging the free oxygen radical species. Coming to the clinical, as we age, these are the different organ systems, and I'll just go through a few with you. The skin, to start with the skin, constant exposure to ultraviolet light can be decreased if there's adequate vitamin A, polyunsaturated fatty acids, cardiovascular, we've just talked about atherosclerosis and hypertension, depending upon how much salt and how much fats is taken, what type of fats. Coming to the musculoskeletal system, where the osteoporosis, decreased muscle mass, osteoarthritis are closely linked to the amount of calcium and vitamin D and the total protein intake that is there. And so you can go down the list right from immune system, endocrine, reproductive. There is a close link, sometimes direct, sometimes indirect, with the food that is taken. So how does the aging process in other ways demand that we should change the nutrition? For one thing, old age is very often associated with malnutrition, and I'll show you some figures for that. Obesity is considered by many people as a type of malnutrition, though when we say malnutrition, we usually think of underweight, but obesity is also very common in old age. as we age, some tissues wear and tear takes place like bones, joints, and these need replenishment. Atherosclerosis, aging is by itself an independent risk factor for atherosclerosis, speeded up by the diabetes and hypertension and metabolic syndrome. But age alone also, in the absence of those diseases, can be, and so can diet do something to prevent this. And then as we know that, we do know that as we age, the incidence of malignant disease increases because of problems with DNA repair, etc., cell senescence. And so can diet do something to prevent malignant disease from coming on? Let's look at weight in the elderly. It's well known that obesity is very common in older people. And we have been taught for a long time that obesity decreases the lifespan, again, because of its correlationship to comorbidities and to the mechanical effects on the musculoskeletal system. But recently, people have found in surveys that older people seem to be living longer. And so somebody has coined a word called the obesity paradox. And we don't know whether it's the truth or really a paradox. But in general, we believe that obesity is to be prevented. It could be that when they looked at their cohort of people whom they studied, they included a lot of people who had this syndrome called the frailty syndrome, which actually has a high morbidity. And so it looked as though the older people, the more obese people were living longer. Why do people gain weight? For one thing, as I said earlier, basal metabolic rate decreases, exercise decreases as you age, but the caloric intake may not commensurately decrease. And so all this leads to weight gain. The reverse is also true, that frailty may happen, or just underweight and malnutrition because of anorexia, which is imposed by physiological reasons, some pathological reasons, the drugs that people take, psychological, because of loneliness and depression and these things. So anorexia of aging is also equally known. And here I'd like to just show a table in which Indian studies, very small studies in elderly people, both rural and urban, have shown that using the mini nutritional assessment, which is a very robust way of checking for nutritional status, very small studies, 200, 190, etc. And they have shown a very large percentage of people older people are underweight, 63%, 67%, 50%. Only one study here in an old age home has shown 11%, but they showed a lot of obesity. So underweight, malnutrition is a very common thing in the elderly in our country. Let's look at the actual nutrients that we take and then see how these can affect. And once we know about them, only we can know how they can have an effect on aging tissues. So the macronutrients, we're well aware of: carbohydrates, proteins, fats. Maybe fiber is something which has become very important of late. And it has been shown that carbohydrates should form only 45 to 65% of the total calories. Now in India, because of a wheat and rice-based diet, our carbohydrates tend to be on the upper limit, and we need to decrease that. Proteins. It was felt that elderly people just need the same requirement, 0.8 grams to 1 gram per kilogram per day. But recently, a lot of evidence has come to show that if you increase the protein intake to 1.2 and sometimes to even 2 grams per kilogram per day, then some of the sarcopenia can be reversed, but this is still on the drawing boards. Fats is again another very important factor because of atherosclerosis, and there was a huge curb on the amount of fats to be taken. But again, it has been shown that it's not the total amount of fat, but really the quality of the fats that is to be used, and I will talk about that a bit more. Fiber, as I said, at least 30 grams per day for colorectal cancer, for decreasing the intake of refined carbohydrates, and other things. Fiber is very important. And also, as we age, the propulsive action of the gut diminishes, and to reduce constipation, fiber is very important. And then we have the micronutrients. We all studied about vitamins and minerals, but phytochemicals is something which has become very important of late because of their antioxidant properties. So a little bit more about carbohydrates. Main thing is avoidance of simple sugars. Now, this is a bit difficult because as we age, the taste sensation decreases and we don't feel the sweet and the salt. So there's a craving for highly salted and highly sweetened foods. So this has something to be avoided. And there's a great emphasis now on whole grain cereals because of the fiber content and also the nutrients that can removed when cereals are refined. I want to dwell a bit on the fats. As you know, cholesterol and fatty acids, which are present in the triglycerides, make up the fat content of the food. Cholesterol is present only in animal fats. And fatty acids are of these types: saturated, monounsaturated, polyunsaturated, and of course the trans fatty acids. And we'll talk about that a bit more. And then we have proteins, which come from plant and animal sources. Animal sources are well known to be a better class because they contain all the essential amino acids, whereas plant proteins, though they are good, they all lack at least one or two amino acids, which are the essential amino acids. But this can be made up if you take a variety of plants. Then what one plant protein lacks, it can be made up in another. And the world is moving towards plant-based diet, and so as also the elderly, because as we know, the animal proteins contains a lot of saturated fats and many other problems. So we are moving towards a plant-based diet, and so the intake of protein has to be carefully looked at. As I said again, fiber. So I would dwell something about on the fatty acid. This is not particularly related only to older people. This is relevant to all age groups. So let's just study a little bit about the biochemistry. We know that saturated fats, they don't have any double bonds. And if you have one double bond, there's a long carbon chain. If you have one double bond, it's a monounsaturated. And if you have many double bonds, then it is a polyunsaturated. And the focus of attention has been on the omega-3 and omega-6. These are the essential fatty acids, the linoleic acid and the linolenic acid. And it has been found that omega-3 is very important. Why do we say omega-3? Where in a fatty acid, in unsaturated fatty acids, if the hydroxyl position is in the 3 position, carbon 3 position, then we call it as a omega-3, and if it's in the 6th position, then we call it as omega-6. And trans fatty acid is one in which the hydrogen ions are on the same side as the double bond when it's a cis in an unsaturated. But when they're on opposite side, it's trans. And this is now found out to be a very atherogenic form of fatty acids. And whenever you heat polyunsaturated fatty acids, like in baking and frying, then you form a lot of trans fatty acids, and that is to be avoided. Now, over the millennia, people have found out that from hunter-gatherer to agricultural to industrial age, the total fat has suddenly increased intake. And more than anything, it is in the unsaturated fatty acids, the omega-6 has increased and the omega-3 has come down. Why is this important? Now, the ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 should be 1:1. But what has happened now is with the high intake of vegetable oils and cereals that the omega-6 has taken off, and we are now eating something like 20:1, 20 omega-6 to 1. And I'll tell you why, for those who may not be so aware, that the omega-6, which is the linolenic acid, is more to do with the arachidonic acid pathway, and these through cyclooxygenase and lipoxygenase give rise to more of inflammation and vasoconstriction, whereas the omega-3, which contains EPA and DHA, they are more towards vasodilation and reduced inflammation. So it is in our interest to take more of omega-3, but we'll come to see how this is difficult. And so we're taking too much of omega-6, and there's a lot of effort to try to make us take omega-3, but it is an uphill task. So this you can see here, omega-6, the one that we want to reduce, is present in biscuits, cakes, fried snacks, cured meats, sausages, salami, etc. Whereas the healthy ones are the nuts. So we need to take a lot of these, and especially walnut. And omega-6 is present in all the vegetable oils that we take, and there has been a shift towards vegetable oils over the ghee and the butter because of so much of public health awareness about it. But unfortunately, most of the vegetable oils are omega-6. There are only 3 or 4 which are omega-3, higher in omega-3, and we'll come to that. The omega-3 in the vegetarian is the chia and the flax, walnut, soya, cauliflower, kale, and spinach. And that's why you would have seen a lot of food faddists promoting the chia seeds and the flax seeds, which the prices, I think, go off the roof, and we are not used to eating it. And so these things are available, but only those who can afford it are taking it. Omega-3, the good, the alpha-linolenic acid, which we need more of in the non-vegetarian, are present in very few foods, mainly the fish, the salmon, sardines, and mackerel. So all the Kerala people who are taking sardines and mackerel, the fatty fish, you can be very pleased with yourself. But when it comes to fish eating in other areas, it's usually freshwater fish. It's the marine fish really which contain a lot of omega-3. So trans fats are very, very important in atherosclerotic disease. And here you can see is a graph in which they show the incidence of when you implemented a ban on trans fatty acids, the degree of cerebrovascular disease and cardiovascular disease deaths came down. When there was no ban, it remained. So trans fatty acids is something to be avoided, not just in elderly people, in everybody, but particularly so in elderly people. Now, let us dwell a bit upon protein intake. As I said, initially it was thought to be 0.8, but now new evidence shows that it is higher. So for a 50-kilogram person, if you want to, he needs 60 to 100 grams of protein. And as we see later, protein in a plant-based diet is difficult to take. And if it's a 70-kilogram person, it's 84 to 140 grams as compared to only 56 according to the past recommendation. So why do we need this? For one thing, it has been shown that muscle health, we lose lean body mass and muscle. We get sarcopenia, which is a hallmark of a very ill understood disease called frailty. And people feel that if you give more protein, it may reverse the process, but it is not yet clear. It may be exercise, it may be many other factors, but it makes good sense intuitively to increase the protein intake. It's also for optimal weight and for decreasing obesity, a higher protein intake is helpful. And of course, for cardiovascular health and to improve diabetes. So protein, as you can see here, 3 to 5% of muscle mass per decade is lost after the age of 30 years. And that is the reason for increasing protein intake. The other thing is, as we age, the albumin levels decrease. This is a well-known fact. And when we have decreased albumin levels, say 3 or even less than 3 grams per 100 ml, the drugs that you give have to be altered, because many of the drugs are protein bound. And so if you give the same dose, then the free drug concentration may rise. And because of low albumin levels, there may be decreased wound healing also. So all these are some of the reasons why elderly people would need a higher protein intake. Now, one of the things that has been very much in the popular press is whey protein. Whey is the liquid that is remaining after you split the milk to get cheese. And this protein is a high content of the amino acid leucine. And it has been found that leucine is very important for building up muscle mass. And so you see many young people who want to build muscle mass, they take whey protein, and there's a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of money is being made by the nutraceutical companies for this. But some caution is to be added, because they do add a lot of sugars and fats, because you see, this does not come under the tight regulatory regulations which drugs comes under. And so the manufacturers may add a lot of sugars and fats. Some toxins have also crept in. This is bisphenols is actually a plastic. And many years ago, you would remember that the Chinese industry added melamine to baby food, and many of those children got kidney stones and died. And of course, those people were severely punished. But we have to look at the manufacturing process of whey food when it is made, whey protein when it's made commercially, and some heavy metals have also been found in it. Now, interestingly, whey protein supplementation in elderly has not been studied much. I came across one review here in 2020, recent one, in which it was a systematic review of 35 studies in over 5 years. And they did say that muscle performance improved, it protects against sarcopenia, it reduces the risk of falls, improves recovery from diseases, prevents cardiovascular metabolic disease, improves even fatty liver. However, the studies are too few and too small in number, and more work needs to be done in the elderly in the use of whey proteins. So this is something which is a work in progress. Now I'd like to dwell upon micronutrients. As you know, micronutrients are the vitamins, and we don't need to dwell on this, except that vitamin D is very important, and vitamin B12, which we'll look into. Phytochemicals, these are all the phytochemicals which have been identified, estrogens in soya, curcumins in our turmeric, lycopenes in tomatoes, and a host of phytochemicals, and a lot of interest in this, that they actually may act as scavengers of free oxygen free oxygen species, and may then prevent a lot of the aging process that takes place. Minerals, very important. We know all about this, and iron is something which elderly people will need. Cobalt and copper, all these things, iodine, are very important, just as in younger. But calcium is the one that we focus more in elderly people because of this effect on bone. So if you're deficient in calcium and vitamin D, then bone resorption becomes much out of sync and much more accelerated over bone deposition, and therefore acceleration of the normal osteoporosis, aging. So here again, vitamin D, it's recommended that we should have a higher amount of vitamin D for elderly people. It should be less than 4,000 units. Calcium, 1,200 milligrams per day. It's present in milk, dairy, soya. And this amount is very difficult to actually take the full amount. So elderly people need a supplementation of at least 500 milligrams of calcium so that the rest can be got from their food. B12, as we know, comes only in non-vegetarian food, and so vegetarians need a supplementation. 2,400 micrograms is what is needed, and I will dwell with this more as we go on. So why is vitamin D requirement more? For one thing, the elderly skin has a reduced ability to convert the precursor to vitamin D3. And then again, older people now are not going out into the sun, the sun exposure is not there. So supplementation of at least 800 milligrams is what everybody talks about. And it has been well shown in these studies, recent studies, that it can prevent falls in 14% by vitamin D3 supplementation. Fracture hip reduction is 26% if you have adequate vitamin D or vitamin D supplementation. Now, vitamin D is one of those vitamins which has received a lot of attention because of its favorable effect on cancer, in inflammation, infections, cardiovascular disease. But a lot of studies have shown that though theoretically and in the lab, vitamin D and its metabolites are very important in these diseases, actual supplementation is not helpful so far. But supplementation in falls reduction and in fracture reduction has been proved, and this is a very important reason why vitamin D levels should be adequate in elderly people. As I said, vitamin B12 is a special concern in vegetarians. For one thing, as the elderly lining of the stomach decreases, the gastric achlorhydria is very common. And if you take foods like metformin, or if you take proton pump inhibitors, then the achlorhydria prevents the absorption of B12 from being cleaved from the food substance. But if you give a supplementation in a vitamin, then there is no problem of absorption, even if there is achlorhydria. So it is very important to check vitamin B12 levels, or actually I would just replace vitamin B12 because now high dose oral forms are available as 500 micrograms. The usual vitamin complex tablets contain very little vitamin B12, but if you now give the oral 500 micrograms, it is more than sufficient. And any levels, anybody who has cognitive defect or peripheral neuropathy and the levels are less than 180 picograms, they should get even injectable forms of vitamin B12. So really, I would like to conclude this session. I will talk about phytochemicals more in the next one, by saying that we have talked about the scientific rationale for special dietary advice in the elderly because of the age-related changes, either in the metabolism or because of the concurrent diseases that they have, and that a very special focus to be made on all macro and micronutrients, but particularly proteins and the type of fats that we take, especially the polyunsaturated fats, the omega-3 and omega-6 ratio. We need more of omega-3 and less of omega-6, which is actually one of the reasons why they say in India, our cardiovascular diseases are more, because though we may be taking less saturated fat than those in the West, but because of our high ratio of omega-6 to omega-3, it is actually quite detrimental. And then we've looked at some of the reasons, some of the challenges for providing nutrients in the elderly. So with that, I would like to, with Dr. Subhadra's permission, I would like to stop the screen sharing and give time for any questions that people might have before we go on to the next session. Is that all right, Dr. Subhadra?
I think, ma'am, we can continue with the session.
Okay.
At the end, we can have the question and answer.
Okay. Right. Okay. So, so carrying on now to session 2. So, yeah, so in this session, what I want to do is that what we've discussed, we apply that to the actual dietary recommendations. It's all very easy to say take so many grams of protein, but how does it translate to actual food for the elderly? So WHO has produced food-based dietary guidelines for the elderly. National Institute of Nutrition, Hyderabad has, and its recommendations are available in the National Health Portal. So before we go into that, there are many challenges. Even if we give a plate of or recommend a good diet for the elderly have got many challenges and not able to take it. As I said earlier, there's a loss of the taste sensation. So they want the foods to be much more heavily spiced. So how do we cannot give heavily salted and heavily sweetened foods because of the bad effects that they have. So it is a recommendation that the food should be spiced with herbs and other things rather than sweet and salt. So this is a challenge to the cooks and the dietitians as to how to make the food palatable to a person who is not able to taste the normal food. Lack of teeth or ill-fitting dentures, lack of salivary secretions, the presence of constipation, which is very common in the elderly, all these things also prevent adequate food intake. And then there is the cultural habits. If a particular, say, somebody has been eating mustard oil and you say now mustard oil is not good for you, it is very difficult to change. So cultural habits are something very important. For example, ghee. It contains a lot of saturated fats and people say, don't eat ghee. How can you tell an Indian to whom ghee is something divine? And the Ayurveda tells us it's a divine food. So cultural habits also sometimes can get in the way of that. Then, of course, many of the comorbid diseases, they require very specific diets, and these diets can be very unpalatable. So now people are in fact saying for the elderly to prevent malnutrition, let them eat a free diet. But this we're talking of a select group of people. And then there are the very important economic reasons. Or many of the foods which are being recommended, like this chia and flax and all these things, they are highly expensive, and older people do not have the means to buy these expensive foods. One of the things we talked about was weight and obesity. Though there is the obesity paradox that I talked about, prevention of obesity seems to be something which we should still aim for. And it has been shown in mice, of course, that if you give less of calories, there's calorie restriction because of the less free radical production, those mice live longer. This has not been proved in humans, but because of the obesity. So how can we do that? How can we give less calories and at the same time give enough nutrients? Because you may then give less nutrients. So the concept of nutrient dense foods has come up. So what is a nutrient dense food? It has a lot of nutrients and are low in calories. So we should try to concentrate on this. This is a very important point in elderly nutrition. So the nutrients, the food should contain a high amount of vitamins, minerals, healthy fats, as we talked about, omega-3 and polyunsaturated, and complex carbohydrates. So,
Ma'am,
yes.
excuse me, ma'am.
Yes.
There is a one request in the chat box to please go in a slower pace.
Oh, I see. Okay. Right. I'm so sorry for that. The foods we should, is it clear, but is it audible?
Yeah, everything is audible. It's
Audible,
okay.
but I'm going too fast. Okay.
That is one suggestion.
Right, sure. I will try my best. So, what are the foods which are dense in nutrients but have low calories? So, these are the food examples: fruits, vegetables. Now, fruits and vegetables is something which is perishable, which is expensive, and at the same time, very important. So you can see here the problem. And to eat fruits and vegetables, you need good teeth. Or the food has to be cooked so much and softened, maybe all the vitamins will come out. Whole grains. Now, when we say whole grains, it doesn't mean that you must eat the whole wheat without making it into flour. It means that it is the unrefined grain has to be made into flour and not the refined. We should not remove the bran and the husk. Seafood is very important. Lean meat, not the fatty meat like red meat. Eggs, very important, but again in moderation. Legumes, which are vegetables which have very high protein content. And then, of course, a lot of emphasis is put on nuts because they have a lot of these phytochemicals, minerals, and they do contain fats, and therefore the calorie content may go up. But some amount of nuts is important, especially walnuts, as we saw, has omega-3, a very expensive nut. But still, this is what I'm saying, the dichotomy between what the science tells us and what is actually practical. And milk. Milk, of course, is the food which contains all macronutrients, but it should be of low fat. Now, in a healthy diet, for the elderly, a lot of interest was put on the Mediterranean diet because people noticed that in the Mediterranean countries like Italy and Greece, especially, these people seem to live longer. There were huge numbers of centenarians there. And so naturally people thought, is it their diet? And they seem to have very little of the chronic non-communicable diseases. So this is the Mediterranean diet where they take a lot of cereals, they have a lot of fruits and vegetables, very little non-vegetarian food, a lot of seafood, and sweets, etc. are much less. So based on this is in the 1960s. Now the thing has reversed. Even in Greece and Italy, people are having more problems, but they still have, they have also found there's a genetic reason for their longevity. But the Mediterranean diet has been modified by countries across the world. And there's a great emphasis on the olive oil. It needs a lot of omega-3 and much less of omega-6. So a lot of emphasis is going on into these kind of diets and limited red meat. So our own food pyramid for the elderly has been in 1998 by National Institute of Nutrition, Hyderabad. You can find it in the National Health Portal. And this is one of the pictures that is being given there. Ours has got milk put into it, a lot of cereals, consume adequately, eat liberally fruits and vegetables, oils to be taken sparingly, non-vegetarian food to be taken sparingly. And they do mention very little about elderly is mentioned in our National Institutes of Health portal. They do say completely avoid ghee, butter, and vanaspati. And because of that, you know, vanaspati, when we grew up, dalda, there was a vanaspati that was a hydrogenated fat. I can see Dr. Subhadra is nodding her head, which was the cheapest form of fats, and we all ate it. Now we all know that it contains trans fatty acids. And Nin says avoid ghee. And as I said earlier, can any Indian avoid ghee? It is the most palatable, the most Ayurveda says it is divine. So I think something needs to be looked into that. But everybody agrees that at least if you take up to 1 tablespoon, it's all right. But large amounts of ghee are definitely not good, and neither is butter. But ghee has got more trans fatty acids than butter because ghee is made by boiling butter. So it's pure butter fat and a lot of conversion to trans fatty acids. And so we also have a dietary recommendation for India, but it is, as you can see here, very little is told. Little guidance on the quantities. There's not much alternatives given. Indian staples like coconut, groundnuts, amla, that is nalikai, is not much talked about in our National Institute's recommendation of the diet. So they do say that don't take processed foods because that contains a lot of omega-6, as we said, and it contains a lot of trans fatty acids. Don't take fast foods, but not much emphasis is given on that which is important in our country. So I think this is a vast area which has to be looked into our national recommendations for nutrition in the elderly. Yes, this is the same thing. Now, there are lots of other popular diets, but are they all right for the elderly? For example, the keto diet, which has a very limited protein. There's the paleo diet, which says don't take any cereals and grains. These are very popular. And now there is one thing called intermittent fasting, in which you have only a 10 or 14-hour window during which you eat. And this has been well shown to improve insulin sensitivity, to decrease weight loss at least 3 or 4 kilos. But none of these things has been tested in the elderly people. So we would not recommend that. Now, the DASH diet, dietary approaches to stop hypertension, that's quite all right. And the Atkins diet. But other popular diets are not really recommended in the elderly. I would like to talk a bit about cereals. We as Indians eat a lot of cereals, and we need to look at what are the proper cereals. In the next slide, you will see that we eat only rice, polished rice and wheat. But these are our ancient cereals like pearl millet, bajra, barley, jowar, maize, quinoa. Quinoa is not really an Indian food. It is imported from the West, but amaranth, which we eat the leaf of, is Indian. And this grain is also available. As you can see here, the protein content of these foods is much higher than what ordinary rice that we eat. So you can see here, quinoa is 13 grams, is the carbohydrate which has the highest protein actually. And ragi is very good. It doesn't have a lot of protein, but it has very high calcium and iron, so very good for elderly people. And as you can see, fiber content of these ancient cereals is quite high. As I told you earlier, we need 20 to 30 grams of fiber per day, and this is per 100 grams if you take, and then other foods will contain it. So a little bit about whole grain cereal. There's a lot of emphasis on whole grain. As you can see here, the bran, when you polish a cereal, you take out this bran, and therefore this contains all the fiber, a lot of phytochemicals, minerals, etc. And only the endosperm contains the starch. So therefore, non-polished rice is more important. And as you can see here, the healthy cereals going on, The white rice, it contains only 7.9 protein compared to the others, and the fiber content is low. Parboiled rice. Now, we all don't, most of us like to eat white rice. Parboiled rice, in which the process in poorer countries like India, parboiling the rice with the husk would be boiled, because then it becomes easier to hull by mechanical means. And by doing this process, many of the micronutrients will come back from the husk into the grain itself. So parboiled rice is very good, but many people don't like it. Now the Kerala brown rice, red rice matta, is very good also, because it is not as polished as the white rice. It contains more of nutrients, and the protein content is also high. Wheat has got a higher protein content, and as you can see, when you refine it to maida, it is much less. So we must encourage the older people to take wheat and not take maida. When we come to legumes, this is another important point which we must encourage elderly people to take. Legumes have a huge quantity of protein, and this is vegetable protein, and they can be divided into three clusters. This author has done that. And as you can see, in cluster ones is most of the legumes that we are familiar with, the azuki beans, the chickpeas, the rajma, kidney beans, all these things. They have a lot of carbohydrate, but you see the protein content, quite high protein, 25%, and some fats. But you take soya bean. Soya bean has the highest protein content, less of carbohydrate. Soya bean is something which is not native to our country, but now, of course, India grows a lot of soya bean, but it is not part of our cultural diet. So you know, this is where the Chinese have another one leg up on us. They take a lot of this high protein legume, and it is also contains a lot of phytochemicals. But soya is one thing which has to be promoted in the elderly. Now, we have Nutri nuggets and we have all these things, but most Indians do not like it. Soya is available as flour, so it can be expensive, but you can mix it into the ordinary wheat flour when you're making chapatis. But if you put too much, then it does not come out nicely as a chapati. You have to put very little quantity. But at least we need to do more research to incorporate soya more into our diet. And you see these legumes and groundnut. Groundnut is native to our country. We have to promote it. And yes, we do eat a lot of groundnut, peanuts, from oil onwards to the actual nut. And this is something which has to be promoted. But you have to note that the fat content of groundnut is quite high. There is omega-3, omega-6, not so much of omega-3 in this. So a lot of micronutrients are present in legumes apart from the protein. As you can see, a lot of minerals also, and phytoestrogens, very importantly seen in soya bean. This is just another slide to show you that peanuts, high protein in peanuts, as well as soya bean flour, whereas the others, you see wheat flour contains only 11%. So peanuts and soya bean is something that we do have to promote. I've just put here a diet for a vegetarian and a non-vegetarian to show you how difficult it is to get protein into a vegetarian diet. So if you take this for a non-vegetarian, an egg every day, 200 ml of curd, a handful of nuts, milk, lentils, and one non-vegetarian meal, 100 grams, you get straight away 25 grams of protein. If you add all this, you can get something like 63 grams of protein, plus some extra which will come from cereals. I haven't mentioned the cereals. So you see, for a non-vegetarian, it is very easy, elderly person, to get the protein. But if you take a vegetarian, you have to make sure that in addition to all the other things like curds and all that, there has to be a legume or an exchange like paneer. So if you take one helping of that, it gives you 14 to 15 grams of protein, whereas in meat, it is 100 grams will give you double the amount. So you see how hard a vegetarian has to work, vegetarian elderly, to get a lot of protein in. And so nuts and milk, etc., at least 46 grams. So this is another thing which we need to focus upon. So if you added more of soya and more legumes into the diet, the problem with legumes is that they contain oligosaccharides, which are not really very easily digestible. So they give rise to a lot of gas formation. And that is the reason why it's limited as the amount of legumes and chickpeas, etc., that you can take. Here I have a slide to show you the phytochemicals. Phytochemicals are very important in the elderly. They're part of the nutrient-dense foods. And you can see these are, here on this column is all the phytochemicals, carotenoids, flavonoids, polyphenols. And these are the foods which contain it. So it's all fruits, vegetables, and one of this, you can see here, amla. Cranberry, raspberry, rosemary are not Indian foods, but amla is, and it contains polyphenols. And here you can see the properties of all these. Here we have some anti-cancer ones, and anti-prostate, reduces prostate symptoms. So you see curcumin also is anti-inflammatory and anti-carcinogenic. So you see there's a whole variety of foods, mainly in the fruits and vegetables category, which have to be promoted in the elderly. And now it is up to the dietitians and the people to actually make these things palatable for elderly people. Vegetable oils. Now, because of the high amount of awareness, public awareness about not taking vanaspati and all that, now people take sunflower oil, safflower oil. They contain a lot of polyunsaturated, which is good, but very little, the navy blue is saturated fatty acids. And as you can see, these are the ones which contain a lot of saturated fatty acids, and Kerala people know that their coconut oil is only saturated, 90% is saturated, as is palm kernel oil. And so coconut oil fell into disrepute and said that all the problems, diseases in Kerala was due to the coconut oil. But as we will see later, it is not all bad. It is on the good side. So soya bean, as you can see, olive oil is the best because it contains a lot of monounsaturated fatty acid. I have not put here the other oil which is very much consumed in India, and that is the mustard oil. Northern India takes a lot of mustard oil. It contains a lot of omega-3, the good one, but it also contains something called erucic acid, which is not so good. And so, and also it has a very pungent taste. So you cannot convince a South Indian to take that. So over the short, the long and short of it is that Indians have begun to eat a lot of the refined sunflower oil, etc., and have come away from this, but still butter and ghee and all that are still consumed. Canola oil is actually the best oil, they say, in terms of omega-3. It is extremely expensive, and I don't think we get so much of it. It's even better than olive oil. I'll skip that one. And I'd just like to conclude this session by saying that whole grain cereals have higher micronutrients and fiber content, and many of them are available but rarely consumed because they were considered as the ancient cereals, and we have all moved into the refined white rice and not even the boiled rice. Fresh fruit and vegetables, very important for vitamins and phytochemicals, and the adequate protein intake is challenging in an elderly person. So this is what we have discussed as the translation of our scientific knowledge into actual foods to be taken by the elderly person. So I now will spend a short time in session 3, and with that I will end. And that is, in this one, I would like to focus more on Indian foods and how we can tailor our knowledge to the Indian elderly. Where do we go from it? So the ideal diet, we have to find the ideal diet for all sections of the socio-economic spectrum, especially for the low-income groups of elderly. We need to have a lot of research on freely available Indian plant foods. How do we increase vegetarian high-protein foods? What about Ayurvedic diets? How can we ignore the elephant in the room? Ayurveda is our science, Indian science. And because we practice the so-called modern medicine, we cannot ignore what has been 3,000, 4,000 years of knowledge which has come from Ayurveda. And we need to stretch our hands out. Now, Ayurvedic science is also coming up a lot, and we need to extend our hand to that and our government also wants to, and our whole population is very much interested in Ayurveda. So I think as modern medicine practitioners, we also have to know something about the Ayurvedic view of diets. And we need research on Indian diets for chronic non-communicable diseases. These are the specific foods which I have alluded to. Groundnuts, very cheap. The Indian gooseberry, Amla nellikai, amaranthus, coconut, oils and ghee, and our ancient Indian cereals. We need much more research on this to see what can be done. Here I came across, while I was researching this, a very recent article in the BMJ Open 2018, where they had head-to-head comparison of coconut oil, olive oil, butter, and they have, this is just a brief end result, butter versus coconut oil showing in this forest plot. And on this side, all the parameters favors the coconut oil. On this side, all the parameters favor butter. So you can see, and maybe you can't see, but total cholesterol, I will read it out, is more favorably influenced when you compare butter and coconut oil. They gave, they looked at blood lipids and all that in healthy men and women. Coconut oil favors over butter the total cholesterol. It raises the healthy HDL cholesterol. This is a well-known fact. The non-LDL cholesterol also is less elevated as compared to butter. And the ratio of HDL to total cholesterol is also in favor of coconut oil. The triglycerides are more with favor butter more. And glucose is almost equal, CRP, weight gain, all these things are almost the same. But when they compared coconut oil with olive oil, you can see on this side of the graph, it favors olive oil. So the total cholesterol was much lower in those who took olive oil, but HDL cholesterol again much higher in coconut oil, which is the good cholesterol. You can see here the triglycerides were more favorably affected with olive oil. The C-reactive protein was more favorable actually with coconut oil. So you can see there's a pros and cons, but generally between coconut and olive oil seems to win over. Between butter and coconut oil, it is coconut oil that wins over. So coconut oil is one of those which is now considered a superfood. And you see, in the past, coconut oil was said it is very bad because of the saturated fats. Now people are saying it is very good. So this flip-flop is going on. Is it a superfood? Some people say it's very good in Alzheimer's, dementia, etc., etc. But the research is very confusing. So this is another area where, as Indian researchers, we need to have more research. Now, why is it touted as a superfood in spite of the fact that it contains so much of saturated fats? It's because it contains lauric acid, which is a medium chain triglyceride. And this medium chain triglyceride gets absorbed very quickly from the gut as it is, and it gets burned off. So they say it does not give rise to so much of LDL elevation, only HDL. But the point is coconut oil contains, also one of the good things is contains less of omega-6, which is the bad omega. So these are the good points about coconut oil. And as we said, HDL increases. But this research, recent publication 2020 in Circulation, they have said that a meta-analysis, they've done 16 studies show no benefit of coconut oil on low density lipoproteins. So we are still out. In spite of all these good points, on blood lipids, it is not very good. But what we do need studies is to see, probably I'll come to that later. Now, when you look at legumes, they say that low rates of breast cancer in Asian countries may be due to soya intake. Also, low rates of prostate cancer due to soya intake, not in India, but in other. And osteoporosis also is favorably affected because of the phytoestrogens in soya. So these are just, even as 1999, many people don't buy this, but this is definitely one thing that we can look at and promote. I want to talk a little bit about amla. Indian literature praises amla a lot. Huge amount of vitamin C, which is a very good antioxidant. Huge amount of calcium is also present in it, and a lot of flavonoids. But this has not come into our modern medicine. It is only promoted by Ayurveda. So we need to actually promote Nelikai much more and do much more research, because whatever research is not there in the global literature, it is very much so there in the Indian literature. But we need in modern medicine to look into this. Now, a little bit about the Ayurvedic concepts. They believe in a very personalized diet. It's not a one size fits all. Because you're this much weight and you have this comorbidity, as we do in modern science, this is the diet sheet you will get. They look at individual body composition, the doshas, how much vata, pitta, and kapha you have, and they prescribe individual diets for individual people depending upon their assessment of your body composition. They have always advocated legumes and whole grains. It is only now that modern medicine is telling legumes and whole grains. They have been shouting this for a long time. But because of the concepts in Ayurveda seem to be so very different to modern medicine, there's very little convergence. And we need to bridge that gap, and only research can show. I'm not saying just accept Ayurveda because it's been there for 5,000 years. We need to have proper, robust science to see whether their concepts hold true in rigorous scientific studies. So I'm going to just stop here and say that both macro and micronutrients play an important part in healthy aging. This is one thing which for elderly, so it's not just for elderly people, but definitely for the elderly, whole grain, fruits, vegetables, and polyunsaturated fats must be given. Protein adequacy. We need a lot of research to unlock the healthy benefits of our Indian foods. And there is a need to look to ancient knowledge to further our understanding of nutrition. And with that, I come to a close, and I would welcome comments and suggestions. I think in the audience, there may be many people who have got many ideas about diet and nutrition. I would welcome that, and whatever I have, I would like to contribute. Thank you. Shall I take this off?
Yeah. Thank you, ma'am, for the session. Now it is open to the audience, participants, to ask questions or put the questions in the chat box. Ma'am, when you mentioned about the use of curd in vegetarians, you mentioned about a 150 ml. As it was 200 ml in the non-vegetarian.
No. That's just a difference. That's a typo error. That's just it is the same whether it's vegetarian or not. It's 200 ml, 8 grams of protein. Yeah. Somebody has asked here to comment on the soya chunks used today. Are they packed with proteins? Yes. The soya chunks and nutrient nuggets and all are all available. It's not that they're not available, but I would like to know how many people eat them. Because when I talk to my elderly people and tell them, take soya, they say, we take it. But how often? Once in a month. So you see, it is not, I personally also don't like it, many people, but we have to have a way of integrating it into our food. So what I advise people is, you have to put it into hot water, this thing, put it in the mixie, just 1 or 2, it becomes like breadcrumbs. And then when you put it into any other curry or poriyal, it's camouflaged. So basically we don't like soya, but we can camouflage it and take it by mixing it with other things. So yes, soya is something which I promote. But when I talk to many dietitians, I had been to Vellore recently and for a geriatric conference and asked them, how come you are not giving any recipes for soya for elderly people? And they also scratched their heads and realized that we are not giving much importance to soya. So I think that's... is there anybody in the audience who has got something to contribute about soya? I'd be very happy to. Tofu.
Ma'am, I have a doubt regarding soya.
Yes.
Ma'am, how often we can take this one? At least weekly once if it takes, do we have any health issues for the elderly people? Especially for the diabetic?
No, I don't really know about any health issues for the diabetics. And if you have, you can tell me, but I don't know. But it's you you can't take it every day. So, I mean, you can take it if you want, because the Chinese and South Asian, they take it every day as tofu. Nothing happens to them. So you can take it if you like it. Tofu is something which is not freely available. It is bean curd, it is soya bean, which is fermented and made into a thing. But I think our Indian palate doesn't really like it all that much. So yes, there's no harm really in that.
See, people have a blind like thinking regarding the people who have creatinine more in their blood. If they take more soya, that may increase or they have altered the level. Is something like that?
That I'll have to look into. I'm sorry, I don't have an answer for that. But I was not particularly aware that soya is not to be taken in renal failure. Yeah, because I don't think it contains high potassium or anything like that. So yeah, I can't answer that question for you in renal failure.
Okay, ma'am, no problem. Thank you.
Somebody has asked, is millets advisable for elderly? Oh yes, millets is definitely can be taken. There's no contraindication. Only thing is, individual people may not be able to digest it. Some of these ancient, I keep calling it ancient cereals, but some of these cereals like barley and jowar and all that, they require much more cooking. And then if you've never eaten them and then you ask an older person to suddenly start eating it, the taste factor, that is the challenge, I said. But there are people who can prepare very nicely. I know that this kambu sadam, pearl millet, if you cook it well and give it like a tair sadam, instead of rice, you put this and put inji and this thing. Dr. Subhadra is nodding her head. I'm sure she makes it at home. And you can really, so it requires a lot of, it doesn't require science. I think, we have a wonderful organization called CFTR in Mysore. They actually have done a lot to produce different types of foods for Indians, but they haven't actually emphasized soya that much. And I wish that they would do that. I was trying to get somebody from CFTRI to come, but I couldn't, was not successful. But this is where we people must provoke governmental agencies and these national agencies to come up with some good things for elderly people and promote them. But certainly Kambam Sadam and all is very good. Millets can be taken by elderly people. Yeah, somebody has asked how much ghee is beneficial for elderly people. As I said, it's all mixed. Ghee is not supposed to be good according to our biochemical evaluation of it because of the trans fatty acids, and it's pure butter fat, But they say that up to 1 tablespoon is all right. Now, where did this 1 tablespoon come from? I don't have a scientific basis for it, but it's a minimal amount. So what we're saying is don't deep fry things in ghee. That is, of course, not very easy. The smoke point is not so high, but little bit of supplementation to improve the taste is something which is quite all right. So up to about 1 tablespoon should be all right. Whereas the National Health Portal says completely avoid ghee vanaspati. I don't agree with that.
Dear madam,
yes.
I have a question. It was very interesting. Your speech was very useful for everyone. It was excellent. Madam, nowadays doctors are advising don't take milk. Milk will increase the obesity. It is not for human beings. It is for cows. So you are advising 200 ml of cow per day, milk per day.
Sorry, I can't see who's asking, but whoever says don't take milk.
I am Sajeevan, madam. I am Sajeevan. I am a physiotherapist.
Okay. Hello, Sajeevan. No,
madam.
I totally disagree when they say don't take milk. I think what only vegans will say that. Vegans are total vegetarians. Plus, they will not take anything which comes from an animal. So they are at severe nutritional deficiency. They have to supplement vitamin D, vitamin B12, and all those things if you are a vegan. And fortunately, in India, though we have 80% are vegetarians, very few are vegans. And that is because our folklore, our culture from Krishna and the gopis is all centered around milk and ghee. So milk is a superfood. It contains all the macronutrients. So it has, I totally disagree saying, but low fat, yes. Don't take full fat. That is the advice. Yes. Yes, Dr. Krishnan.
Could I chip in?
Yes.
That is a very interesting talk, and I didn't realize that you could make dietary habits so interesting and informative. Congratulations. But I must chip in on this, that people like me who have lactose intolerance cannot take milk. Therefore, and the vast majority of the South Asian people or the Far East people like Chinese and Indonesians and all cannot take milk sugar, but they can take curd because
Yes.
it's fermented.
Yes, that is well known because of the lactobacilli in curds. So if you can't take milk, then you take the curds. Otherwise, they say soya milk, but
No, but you can take curds and butter and all
yeah,
that sort of.
yes, yes.
Now, I have a question and a comment. The comment I'll place first, because if you want to reduce weight, the best thing is to advise a person to give up sugar, because after all, it's a white poison like your
True.
cigarette and alcohol. So keep off sugar and you would reduce weight. I can tell you from personal experience. That's a very useful advice that I think would come handy to most of us. But I have an intriguing question. How much is, we do find a lot of vitamin D deficiency. What is the recommended dose? 60, we have very low levels, 60K per month, 60K per week, and if so, for how long? And if you take it in excess, you could get vesicle calculi and so on. So, I mean, do we have any, there are no guidelines, not in the West, not with us. But sometimes some people do swing the other way, but the vast majority still remain hypovitaminosis D. Any comments on that?
I actually could talk for another hour on that, Dr. Krishnan, but I will spare you because I feel that this is a whole lot of hype. When we check vitamin D levels, whether we are checking only the 25 hydroxy or the total vitamin D, whatever we are checking, how do we know that is only the blood level? How does it translate to bone health? In order for that level to be low, you should have intact PTH elevated.
That's true.
PTH should be elevated. We don't check the PTH. So we do not know. There's a whole lot of hype. And when we get such low levels of 5 to 10 nanograms, everybody goes on overdrive and this 60,000 units is given. I cross my fingers because I have seen cases of hypervitaminosis D going into renal failure and all kinds of things. It's very, very dangerous. So people are taking it, and those who give it, they say it's because we've stopped going out in the sun. And with our dark skins, we are not able to absorb the sunlight. So there is a reason for that. But I think the jury is still out. We are treating, in my opinion, a blood level. We are not treating, we don't really know. Before we didn't have these levels, we couldn't do it, so we didn't know. But so I don't believe this at all, but I do believe that we have to give supplementation to all postmenopausal women, definitely. And for men, maybe a decade later, because they still have that, for osteoporosis, because they still have testosterone, which keeps the bone mass high. But for all women must take. And if you look, I find even educated women, educated doctors are not prescribing vitamin D and calcium to every postmenopausal woman. So I think that is very important. That has to be done because vitamin D is very poor in food. In the West, they have vitamin D fortified cereals and milk. We do not have vitamin D fortification because we've got enough God-given sunlight. But now we stopped going into the sun. So I do not know. If you look at the recommendations of the pundits, which is Institute of Medicine in US or wherever it is, they do not advocate routine screening of vitamin D levels. But in India, we are doing routine screening. And if somebody has a back pain, if somebody has depression, you do a vitamin D level, you'll find it's low and you start supplementing. And the placebo effect is they feel better after that. So, and then there are people who take vitamin D with different combinations. Right hand doesn't know left hand. And I have personally seen many cases of hypervitaminosis D in the elderly. So I think we have to be very cautious about these mega 60,000 units. But I think that.
What's your recommendation? What will be your prescription?
So I give everybody 1,000 units of vitamin D plus 5 D3
every day.
Yeah, every day.
And, but there are people who have a lot of back pain and similar symptoms. And if you give them the vitamin D, they do get better. We can't wish it away. But how much of vitamin D to give is a debatable question.
I don't believe that this back pain, and I mean, these are anecdotal stories, you see. You may have seen it in your clinical, but it could be the sweet talk that you gave to that person and the physiotherapy and exercise, which through the vitamin D acted. So I don't think we have the studies to show. And osteoporosis actually does not give rise to pains. Of course, you can have muscle pains, but I personally don't believe in it. Another area for research.
Yeah, I agree with you. The jury is still out on that, and perhaps we are overdoing it. I agree with you.
Madam Alka, I'm
Yes.
Dr. Rama Anand from Hyderabad.
Yes.
I congratulate you for you have considered Ayurveda as well as taken the modern nutrition. I've been a dietitian last 45 years, and I really enjoyed
Are
your
you
talk.
with NIN?
I worked with N9. I worked with CDMS also. I've also worked with many hospitals, starting from
very nice to meet you, madam.
Yeah. My pleasure, ma'am, talking to you. I wanted to answer your soya. I've done extensive work with soya. I was one of the dietitians who have launched soya almost 30 years ago. Now, all of you are concerned about using the soya chunks. There is something called soya granules also available on the supermarket stores, which you can just take a fistful and add it to any curry. And without realizing this soya confusion of having to blend it through the mixie and all, it can directly get absorbed. We have conducted many sensory evaluation tests with soya, with various curries and all that. This particular granules can be easily accepted without any taste change or flavor change, etc. And
That's great.
It enhances to the texture of the curry. For instance, if you make a carrot grated curry, you can add this soya granules to it, and then make the curry in the normal way, like put it on the low flame, whatever, and the curry turns out very good.
It becomes thicker. That's
yes.
Great. But so how can we promote this with elderly people? Because in my practice, what I find is I'm even the granules, as you said, and the flour, they are expensive. And to somehow incorporate it into the porridge, what strategy do you think? So your research is there to show us that it's possible. How can we commercially or make a awareness program? Because I feel that soya is the answer to protein in the elderly.
The organization, the industry which manufactures this and promotes this, the main one, which already does the soya chunks, is also doing the soya granules. You just have to contact them, and they'll conduct and they'll, as an industry, they'd like to promote their product and sell it across. So they will very comfortably do that.
Yeah, that's a very, very, very valuable contribution from your side. And yes, and you mentioned about Ayurveda also. What is your opinion? I spoke to some Ayurvedic specialists and asked them pointedly about soya, and I was very disappointed with the answer that I got. I hope I'm not offending any other person from Ayurvedic sciences who's here, because he said soya is not native to India and we don't recognize soya. So what do you think?
Actually, South, there is not much of a research and work on soya, because people eat what is available locally. For instance, if you look at Karnataka and look at Rayalaseema in Andhra Pradesh, essentially they eat a lot of ragi. And down Andhra Pradesh, where it is a rice belt today, previously they used to eat foxtail, all these millets and all that. But because once one of our chief ministers, N.T. Ramarao, he got this 1 rupee rice scheme, and then they promoted the rice. Then it became a essentially a rice-eating community.
Yes.
So it's the locally
Yes, I
available
think
foods,
urbanization and all these things
political
have
intervention.
taken us away from the actual good cereals which we are abundant with. So
Yes,
we have to promote this more.
political interventions also had their this thing. For instance, the FCI, holding on to the food grains and the storeroom. All that's a big story, ma'am. The other thing I wanted to tell was about all these vitamins. In my last 50 years of experience, I've noticed that initially, way back in the early 70s, there was a big surge of vitamin A deficiency. The vitamin A tablets, if you remember, those red ones, the government started giving it free, and there was so everybody, I was working on some project called Indo Dutch as a immediate fresher from the college. So they promoted it to all the pregnant ladies everywhere. Everybody was given papaya. They said everybody can eat, and there were a surge of abortions, and there was a lot of trouble. So 10 years vitamin A ruled. Then after that, the iron deficiency came. Iron tablets were promoted. After that came the calcium. We all remember that calcium Sandoz. Then after that came the now the vitamin D. And of course, now the latest is the vitamin B12. And then now, of course, with this COVID, it's the zinc which is really ruling the market. So somewhere along the way, it is the pharmacy also, but along the way, but nothing like an locally available ancient food which people are used to. For instance, it's better the South Indians take a lot of buttermilk because of our weather conditions. And if you have read Ayurveda enough, curds and curds and buttermilk at various concentrations is a treatment. For a kidney patient, buttermilk, which is churned well, cream removed, and that is diluted to 8 times, is improves the urination. So like that, and curds with sugar, if somebody
So-
takes it with jeera, it is a constipating. It prevents diarrhea. Anybody has a loose motion, they should immediately take a bowl of curds with sugar and jeera, or methi if it's a little stronger. That immediately prevents the loose motions. So these are all the things you learn from Ayurveda, and you inculcate it into your practical daily with the patients, and it works.
No,
And
the
then I've
point
learned a
what
lot
you're
from the
making, ma'am,
patients.
about the curds. Now, Ayurveda knew it long ago. Only now modern medicine has found out that it contains lactobacilli and probiotics. So
Correct.
zinc also. Zinc now is promoted for children. So there is a lot in ancient Ayurveda, but they couldn't come down to the active ingredient. So we didn't believe it. We need to look at these practices and satisfy ourselves that there is a scientific rationale for these things so that it can fit in. Because in modern medicine, you have to know right down to the molecular level, right down to the genetic level.
There is a gap, ma'am, between what the scientists there are doing with their parameters and their physical tests, etc., and our. Whereas what this has been an ancient science which has been accepted over thousands of years, and it's worked. And at the end of the day, we all get back. I've learned a lot from my patients. One patient walked in one day and told me that asafoetida, hing, is what she suggests for thyroid. And I've suggested it to my patients over so many years, and I've had fantastic response of reducing the althroxin intake for the patients. This is because it's a platform, I'm sharing it so that others can make use of it. So the hing that we use, the little in the food, has a fantastic impact on activating the fineries of the hormonal levels, all the hormones.
But
So this
madam,
is
I would like to disagree with you on that point, because that is an anecdote. I feel now that idea that you had should undergo rigorous scientific testing. This is where we need to do the research, and we need to, you might be right, but till it is shown, we will just take it as anecdotes. So, but it's a fantastic thing to start with when you make an observation. So unfortunately, in our country, we do not have that huge scientific base. Otherwise, an idea like what you had, if it was there in the West, it would have been immediately taken up. Look at our curcumin. We have been having curcumin for years and years. We didn't know. We knew it's very good, but they had to tell us this curcumin, it's a phytochemical and it's very good for anti-cancer. Now they take curcumin latte, whereas we are taking it every day. So this is that scientific temperament which I think we need to promote, because we have a lot of knowledge. Yes.
Okay, thank you, Rama Devi ma'am, for the suggestions. There are more questions like Ma'am, how do you view moringa leaves for the elderly for high nutritional value, zero cost and high fiber,
Oh,
especially in constipation?
okay. If it has high fiber, then definitely it will be there, good for constipation. So anything, but I don't know about moringa particularly. So if there is anyone else who knows, they can. But if it has high fiber, very good, excellent.
Okay, and one more question: is barley drinks good? Barley drinks. You
Yes,
suggested about the barley,
yes, yes.
but as drinks, is it good or as a
Uh,
food itself,
No, no,
solid
both.
food?
I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. Barley is very good when your digestion is not good. It is used in the sick room kind of a thing, a barley drink. But all, if it is as a drink, it is a minimal quantity of the actual ingredient.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
if a person can take, can digest, then the whole barley is better. And the rotis is very good. Yeah.
Yeah, there is Dr. Nandini raising her hands. Ma'am, please unmute and ask.
No, you're muted.
Ma'am.
Okay, here I am. In fact, I enjoyed your talk very much. And your anecdote, I'm not anecdotes, your mention about the traditional medicine, the richness of science of traditional medicine. In fact, I also want to speak a little about the millet culture. It is mainly because in the north, you have this, there are actually practices which have been, passed on from generation to generation. So in North India, they have this makke ki roti and sarson ka saag. Okay, they are complementary and it's millet. They have no problem in eating that, but you ask a South Indian to eat it, it won't be possible. And they use a lot of ghee for that, So it may be a vehicle for digestion, probably. And the other aspect is in South India, Bangalore, you mentioned Mysore. In Bangalore, actually, there are promoters who actually advise about so many dishes with millet. You mentioned one about Thai sadam. The other one is upma. And one of the millets is very tasty actually as an upma. And I also know about, this being promoted in the school where my residential school where my grandson was actually studying. They used to have millet preparation every day, some preparation or the other. Finally, the people who were working there in the kitchen, they said, can we have normal diet one day at least? Okay, that's because people are not used. But in Tamil Nadu, because of the scarcity of water, they raise millet. Millet takes very little water, actually. So millet is actually one of the staple diet that they have. So that is that about millet. The other thing is about ghee. Many a times, we actually talk about the ingredients which have been proved to be content of ghee and other fats, etc., etc. But I understand now that I have actually been exposed to traditional medicine research. I was in ICMR and from 1985 onwards. So I have actually developed a respect for that science, which is much above our knowledge about what we get from the labs. There are compound preparations, and they swear that if the cow is fed on, proper diet, not the plastics that we see them eating on the road, they actually, the ghee from those cows do have a certain value. And some people feed them with certain grass types, actually reflect the milk. So that is also done in some centers. They have done studies on that. And ghee as such is advocated by Ayurveda, because ancient times they were all using the ghee. And that ghee is not the ghee that we get now, which is processed and things like that. So they say that you can make a ghee at home itself. And that will be the best one to be used. The other aspect that I wanted to say was that there are these phytochemicals. What we isolate from that as drug, phytopharmaceuticals, now they have the term for that as phytopharmaceuticals. It has to actually satisfy certain criteria. to be called as phytoconstituents and phytopharmaceuticals. But there are foods, we have seen that they are so, they're compounds which actually have the feedback mechanism within itself. For example, I can just give you one example about anti-diabetic drug, which is taken from a tree called Vijay, or you call them Bijasol. It depends on which region from where you are getting it's actually heart stem. So you have to cut the whole tree, which has to be at least 15-year-old. Now, when you're using this particular thing, in one of the labs, they found the fractions. So they try to fingerprinting, and they try to find the factors which may have biomarkers property. No, sorry, biomarkers which may have some property, and they found that at least 2 of those biomarkers were hyperglycemic, and the others were hypoglycemic. So just in case you are going into hypoglycemia, the other 2 factors will work. So these are certain things that we are trying. But what about the ancient practitioners? Centuries of research led them to actually evolve the practice guidelines. And that cannot be wasted like that. In between, we have forgotten that science. And naturally, the Britishers coming in, Macaulay and all those people, Boer Committee, everyone sidelined that science. So, they were actually not encouraged to come up to the same level as modern science. So modern science is using modern tools. It's not as old as 5,000 or something like that, 200 years or 300 years maximum. But they have utilized the scientific tools to such an extent that they can talk about evidence-based proof. Okay. But these people have not been exposed to that, or they don't know about, but they have not used it in this research mode of that. But now things are changing. People have become aware of that, and they are using NMR, etc., to study the structure and its effect on the body. And I have seen the proof of that. How they talk about the channel theory. How each drug has its action to, and if the channel is blocked, you have that illness wherever that channel is being blocked. And I have seen the NMR picture where these channels are open, and even after Gayatri Mantra Japa. Okay, and this channel is actually picturized in the brain. So there is a science there. We need to discover it, and it's not going to be very easy also. So that's what I just wanted to say. I don't want to take much more time.
No, I just want to add a comment to what you have said, is that Western science wants to go deep into and look at the molecular level, and then shows an effect on a surrogate marker. It does not, for example, you give something coconut oil and you look at blood lipids. What we need to do is to look at what did it do to the outcome of the disease. Those are much longer studies. So that's why I feel that this coconut oil, which is from down in the boondocks to now superfood, we have to do a cohort study of elderly or people. And if we can get Keralites of the same ethnic background, eating everything else the same, remove all the confounding variables, but we have to find somebody who doesn't take coconut oil, somebody who takes, but some kind of a control group and a longitudinal study. In the West, like Minnesota and all that, they have got cohort studies.
Actually, I would like
to do those kind of studies to see whether our Indian foods are good or not for the elderly.
I can actually relate one particular incident when I was working in gastroenterology. The young juvenile diabetics, it's very hard for them to digest fatty food, okay, because they lack the enzymes. Pancreas is affected, so digestive enzymes coming from that are not there anymore to help them digest that food. So they are asked to avoid the food. But I was told by the professor that coconut oil has got mid-chain fatty acids which do not require bile acids or
and directly
the
absorbed.
pancreatic juice. Yes, so that they can digest. And I have done actually study in stool fat, 6 days of collection of stool fat and seen the effect also. So that is one point. The second point is they call now system biology. System biology is actually going deeper, and like we have learned during my biochemistry, tricyclic acid cycle and all that, glucose metabolism and all that. But it is much more than that at molecular level. And there's something called genomics, which is coming up. So there are actually attempts to use the scientific tools to bring out the theories to validate the
explain the ancient knowledge.
Yeah. But I don't know whether we will need the next generations to come out with something very solid about it. Thank you so much
very
for
useful,
your
very useful.
Okay,
So
thank you, Nandini ma'am. Any more questions? I think the questions. There is one suggestion that the good discussion about vitamin D and a good topic for research too.
Yes, that is Dr. Rahul Sen. He's my postgraduate student.
Yeah, okay.
We'll ask him to do it when he finishes his thesis. His thesis is on something else, I know. Yes.
Okay, I think the questions are over. And one more question, whether the boiled peanut or roasted peanut is good.
I mean, I think peanuts in any form, is okay. One thing, when you roast, there are certain changes taking place in the food, and certain, the food should not be charred. But when it's charred, the nitrosamines and all which are put, I don't know whether this refers to peanuts, but very high heat and formation of certain chemicals, like in air fryer. When everybody says, oh, very nice, you put in an air fryer, very little oil, and you will get feels just like fried food. But we don't know how much of change and chemicals gets added, which is actually carcinogenic. I'm not saying about roasted peanuts, but boiled and roasted, I don't think there should be much of a difference, but I do not know the complexities of that. But peanut as such, I think, is another thing like soya, which is, it is Indian, it is cheap, it is freely available. Only thing is little high fat content, but we need to make that more widely available and used.
Coming back to soya, ma'am, you mentioned about the soya chunk too. Whether soya bean and soya chunk are the same? Because
yes. Chunk is just a form, how it is produced, but it all contains soya.
Okay.
So that doesn't make any difference.
I think
I also wanted to, can I add to that? There is actually among vegetarians, why they want to avoid soya beans. They feel that it is looking like meat chunks, no? The appearance itself is actually repulsive for them. So
in fact, now in the West, they are making vegetarian meat. So they are processing the plant food so that it tastes like meat to them. So we can't do the reverse. We can't take the non-vegetarian way, taste like vegetarian food. But I think generally the whole world is going towards plant-based. And all these stuff, which is like sausages and salamis and all the cured meats and all that, we must stop eating it. And they are really bad for our health because of all the chemicals and things they contain. So I think we have to focus on Indian food and make it more palatable and better for the elderly. Thank you.
Also, Alka, ma'am, where do you practice?
Sorry?
Which part of India you
practice? I am in Coimbatore in GKNM hospital. Now, because of my aging process, I have sort of come back, and I'm not actually seeing patients, but I'm actively teaching. I'm teaching allied health and postgraduate DNB students, but I don't practice so much now.
At Coimbatore, ma'am?
Yes, yes.
Which hospital?
Kupaswamy Naidu.
Okay, okay, right. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay.
So thank you, ma'am. We shall wind up because the time is running out and it is around 9 o'clock, I think so. So
thank you very much for giving the opportunity and for rescheduling me again after all
yeah.
that. Okay. Thank you. So should we closing now? Dr. Subhadra, we are closing now.
Thank you, madam. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Good night.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for the informative session.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Sir, are you putting this talk on YouTube? Is this webinar getting onto our YouTube?
Yes, ma'am. Yes. It is available on YouTube.
The entire talk and the discussions. Thank you.
Everything, all the presentation is there. You can check with the website, university website.
Which university, sir?
Kerala University of Health Sciences, ma'am.
Kerala University of Health Sciences.
Yeah.
Can you just give the link now here in this so we can?
Oh, ma'am. Can you put your mobile number in the chat box? I will send you.
All right, I can do that. Will do. Thank you.
WhatsApp number.
Right, I'll just give it to you.
Madhavi, ma'am.
Yeah, I seem to have lost, sir. I'll get in touch with you. Can you just?
I send the number. I send the number.
Oh, you
So in
sent it to me.
In the chat box, you can have Subhadra's number. You can contact her. She's a center in charge.
Sir, you have sent it on the chat box, is it?
Yeah,
But then
yeah.
I mean, I'm out of the thing. I'm not able to get back there. I'll. Can you just give me? I'll note it down.
I will tell you.
Yeah, I'll note it.
94473.
Yeah. Yes.
94473.
Yes.
56378.
94473 56378.
Dr. Subhadra.
Dr. Subhadra.
She is in charge of the Gerontology Center. Center for Gerontology, Health University.
94473.
563.
Sorry, 56. 56.
3 563 78.
Yeah, I'll get in touch with her, sir. Thank you so much. It's been a very informative session. By chance, somebody sent me and I could attend your session.
Very good. Yeah, your discussion was very good.
Thank you, sir. Are you also a nutritionist?
Active. Yeah, fine. I heard that. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Nice to have a discussion with you.
Thank you. Are you also a nutritionist, sir?
No, I am a homeopath.
Homeopath.
Yeah, I work in a homeopath college.
Oh, I see. Very interesting, sir. Say your good name, sir. I've come out of it. I'm not able to get back to it.
Dr. Narayana Pai.
Dr. Narayana Pai. Okay. Yeah. In fact, they were speaking of coconut oil. There is tremendous consumption of coconut oil even in Karnataka belt. That North Kendra belt.
Ma'am, you are from Kerala or
Karnataka?
Karnataka. Which part of Karnataka?
Bangalore, Gauribidnu, but living in Hyderabad.
Oh, fine.
Last so many years.
Yeah. Nice to meet you, ma'am.
Nice to meet you, sir. We'll be in touch with you all.
Yeah, sure.
It's a pleasure. Do include me into your web. Do include me into your webinars.
Sure.
Thank you.
You just talk to Dr. Subhadra and give your number or email ID. So that you will get all the intimations.
Right away, I'll talk to her, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much. God bless all. Hope all of you will do very well. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, ma'am.
Good night.
Go ahead. കുഴപ്പമില്ല കഴിക്കണം. എത്ര അല്ല അത് കുഴപ്പമില്ല. എത്ര
3 ദോശ 32. അതാ അതിലെത്ര
ശരി. ഇല്ല മറ്റേതായ ഡൈവേഴ്സ് ആയോ?
അറിയത്തില്ല. സൈലന്റ് കൊടുക്കാൻ പറഞ്ഞതേ ഉള്ളൂ. കിട്ടില്ല. പിന്നെ കാണിക്കുന്ന കോർട്ടില്ലേ, അപ്പൊ സൈലന്റ് ആയിരിക്കും.
ഞാൻ അവിടുത്തെ ആ പെണ്ണിനെ അമ്മ ആ കൊച്ചിനെ
ഞാൻ ചുമ്മാ ഇത് എടുത്താ 3 ഉത്തരം നോക്കിയാണ്. ഇപ്പോഴായിട്ട് ഒപ്പം കളിക്കുന്ന വീട്ടിൽ കളിക്കുന്നവർക്കും അതെല്ലാം കിട്ടുമല്ലോ. അത് ഇപ്പൊ തുടങ്ങിയതാണ്. അതൊപ്പം കളിക്കുന്നു. അതിപ്പം തുടങ്ങി. അത് ഒപ്പം അങ്ങനെ തന്നെ കണ്ടോ ഒപ്പം കളിക്കുന്ന അവരൊക്കെ പറഞ്ഞു. ഒപ്പം കളിക്കും. ഒന്ന് വെച്ച് വെച്ചിട്ട്